This episode is sponsored by The Alcohol Experiment, a free 30-day challenge designed to interrupt your patterns, give you control, restore your health, and put you back in touch with the version of you who doesn't need alcohol to cope, relax, or enjoy life. More than 220,000 people have already tried The Alcohol Experiment for themselves and have seen improved sleep, increased happiness, reduced anxiety, and so much more. Join thousands in this inspiring, hopeful, and exciting program where you examine your beliefs and reconnect with the best version of you without ever feeling like you're missing out. Start today for free at alcoholexperiment.com. Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to this Naked Mind podcast. And I'm here with Carol. Welcome, Carol. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hi, Annie.
Hi. So good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, why don't you sort of walk us back to the beginning where everything sort of started for you?
Yeah, so I guess I would start off by saying I was not a big party girl when I was younger. I grew up in Western Mass, and I did typical, drinking beer around a bonfire in the woods with my older brothers, or just the typical teenage things. I mean, I don't even think I drank wine until maybe after university. It was really kind of beer drinking with, like I said, friends out in the woods, and then and some drinking in college, but not super exaggerated. It wasn't until later, much later, in my 20s and 30s, and then later I moved to Italy and started really getting interested in wine from a kind of professional perspective, because I got into tour guiding and so forth. And I really kind of used the my knowledge of wine as an excuse, I think, to drink a little bit more than I needed to. And then it just kind of evolved from there.
And so when was sort of your first drink? Was it in college then? Or did you dabble at all in sort of high school?
High school for sure. No. My first drink was absolutely in high school, drinking with my older sister, a little bit with my brothers, and then friends and friends in the woods and after school and on weekends. Oh yeah, we used to drive around in cars and drink beer. I mean, I do remember drinking as a teenager, but I don't remember blacking out or drinking way too much or getting sick or anything like that. I was relatively shy and quiet and a bit afraid of other things like pot and drugs. And so I kept it pretty, let's say, under control. It wasn't until I would say, later in college and then moving to Europe later in life that I really started drinking more.
So what happened in Europe? Why don't you take us there? Tell us about that.
So I actually I studied something completely different than what I've been doing for the last 25 years of my life. I studied journalism and film and video, both in Boston and San Francisco. Lived in San Francisco for a while, was involved in the film industry there, and then started just traveling on my own to Europe and other parts of the world. And I got very excited about trekking and adventure sports, so trekking and mountain biking and road cycling, and did a lot of biking in different parts of the world, especially in Italy, because my grandparents immigrated from Italy to the United States, and so they still had family here in Italy. And I would come my summers and spend time with my family here in Italy and bike around. And anyhow, this passion for cycling kind of led me to a career in active tours. So I came to Italy in the early 90s and was leading bicycle tours for a good 7-8 years for a large company that does only bicycle tours in Italy. And then later moved into trekking and hiking trips, and then a couple of years ago started my own company doing active tours, but also very much focused on food and tastings. And so this has been kind of my life work now for more than 25 years. But wine is a big part of all that, of course,
Yeah.
living in Italy. And you know, I've seen a couple other of your podcast interviews with people in the wine industry. It's always so interesting to me to hear other people like myself or talk to other guides about this issue, because I think it's pretty common that people who work around wine or any kind of alcohol can find themselves in pretty tricky situations. With abusive situations, because you're just in our case with groups, you're just drinking, you know, you drink at dinner with them every night, and it just becomes this kind of habit, and then they go to bed and you sit around with the other guides and drink until much later in the evening. So, you know, it was kind of it was very accepted amongst the sort of guide culture over here in Europe. It's
Yeah.
changing now, though. It's changing.
And yeah, I've heard that certainly from lots of different people in the wine industry. One woman, Joanna, she's like, yeah, it was, you know, me on one side until it was me on the other side when I realized that it was coming for me too. Like it was, you know, kind of inescapable. Or people who are bartenders who no longer drink, or own bars who no longer drink, because it just, you know, it accelerates. We're all drinking is a trajectory, and being, you know, having it be so normalized and just so exposed to it, it definitely accelerates things.
Yeah.
Big
Yeah.
way. So
Yeah.
what were some of the moments, or go ahead.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. It's just because then you become part of a kind of culture within your own industry. And then it just becomes kind of normal to. I've talked to a lot of sommeliers who say, you know, they're sometimes drinking all day long, and they're taking small sips here and there and tasting different things, but by the end of the day, they're pretty far gone. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So what were some of the moments in this time that you started to realize, like, wow, this is not exactly the romantic thing I thought it was?
Well, I started not drinking on tour because I realized that I wasn't able to sort of keep it together and keep everything organized and flowing and take care of people. Of course, if we had to drive the van and take people out to dinner or whatever, we wouldn't drink. I mean, that was a pretty obvious thing. But then there were, you know, in the past there were times where we drank a lot on tour. And anyhow, as I was like getting older and realizing like I just can't drink on tour, I stopped drinking on tour, but then I would come home and, you know, have weeks in between tours and sort of make up for the drinking that I didn't do on tour at home. And I realized at that point that it was not, I did not have a healthy relationship to wine. I mean, I knew that I didn't, even while drinking on tour, and then I stopped drinking on tour and then realized that, you know, there was an issue, that there was a bad relationship. So my approach to it, though, was really interesting, because I said, well, I'm gonna do a detox, or um, I'm gonna fast. I'm gonna fast, and then after my fast or detox or whatever, I'll just clean out my body, and I won't want a drop of alcohol ever again. You know, all these kind of funny mind games. And I worked with a nutritionist, and, you know, and then of course eventually drank again. And then I thought, well, you know, I'll try AA, and went to AA and had a short-lived experience with AA. And then that kind of led to looking online and learned about hip sobriety and different things, which eventually led me to the 30-day alcohol experiment. And then from there, I did the intensive, still drank during the intensive, and then went to the path. And I think it was 2 months into the path, I got sober. So December 13th was a year. So it's a year and 4 days now.
Yeah, congratulations. That's so amazing. And I want to dig into some of your story through the pandemic too, as we've discussed previously, because I know it was hard and you stayed the course and it was beautiful. But before we get into that, what was it about? Like, what was the final sort of shift for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
And
It's an,
sometimes you don't know. I mean,
I mean, people say I'm so sick and tired of being sick and tired. There's that, but it was really, I have two teenage boys, and it was so tiring and I mean, disgusting sounds like a really strong word, but I was disgusted with myself. I felt like I wake up in the morning, I feel horrible. I see my sons and I don't even have the energy to engage. But I did anyways. You have to fake it to some degree. I made it through life. I was running a business. I was doing everything on the surface, very high functioning or whatever, but I felt so bad all the time. I just felt bad. And I think that the inner shift was sort of just, I just can't do this anymore. I just can't live this way anymore. It's just, I'm not living up to the best person that I can possibly be. And so it's got to stop. It's just got to stop now. Now, I did drink after that. I had data points here and there. So, and it's interesting to think about how those incidents happened. But here I am, and I'm alcohol free, and life is completely different than it was before.
that's so awesome. So in what ways is it different? How would you describe the difference?
Well, it's much more vibrant on every level. So yeah, I feel all the feels. I feel sadness and intensity, and especially this year with the pandemic, I lost all my work. And in fact, I was a little bit worried in the beginning, like what was going to happen with the pandemic, and knowing that I had so many months ahead of me without work and so much time at home. And I lost even a lot of my writing work because I do a lot of blogging about Italy, and all that kind of was going away. And I think I knew that if I went down that path, it was over. I knew that if I went down that path, it really wasn't going to make things better. Of course, as we all know, it makes things 10 times worse. But anyhow, to answer your question, life is, well, especially here in Italy, I feel so lucky to live where I live. I live in a beautiful place. I'm out in nature every day. I have two gorgeous children. I have a beautiful career that, it'll come back. The trips will come back, work will come back. And I've had to really dig deep to figure out what I'm going to do to get through this year. So actually, Annie, it's really strange. I'm gardening right now. I'm working for a cooperative, an Italian cooperative, gardening for big villas up in the hills behind my house. And it's really funny because that's sort of my family business. And it's something that I never, never thought I'd be doing. But here I am doing it. And at least I'm out in nature every day, and it's a temporary thing, but I'm learning all about gardening. And so life is beautiful. And I think it just feels so much more colorful. And I'm not super religious. I am very spiritual, but I go to bed at night and like say thank you to God. And I'm not like a God person. It just kind of comes out. I think it's because I was sort of raised, with a God, and it's just, it could be anything though. It's just I just feel so excited when I wake up in the morning, when I go to bed at night, just about everything that I have. It's gratitude. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to feel that when you're feeling sick all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. So true. And so you had some really intense challenges. I mean, you were like, and you're still in Italy, but I remember we were talking at the beginning about lockdown, and it was literally almost illegal for you to leave your house, like just to go for walks. And then your, your travel business was, the bottom was falling out. And can you talk to us about what some of those challenges were and how you navigated them alcohol free?
Yes, so back in March, they were changing things every couple of weeks. So there was like phase one, then phase two. But in phase one, basically the prime minister got on Italian television and said, you cannot go more than 200 meters from your house. So in other words, if you have to go out and walk your dog, that's fine, but that's it. And so for me, that was just horrible. I couldn't imagine like not being outside and in the outdoors every day of my life in some way or another. So fortunately, I live in the countryside and there are paths leading out behind my house that nobody ever goes on. And I was kind of sneaking out and getting some exercise anyways, because it was the only way that I was not going to drink. Actually, it was the only way. And my kids were kind of giving me a hard time because I was like breaking the law or whatever, and kids can be that way. Like they're looking after you and are you doing things right? And I explained to them, I just said, I have no choice. I must do this. I must, for my own sanity and my own health, I must go out and walk. And so I would go out and walk for 3-4 hours. And then, they lightened that up a little bit. Then they said you could go exercise. Maybe a few weeks later, it opened up a bit and you could go exercise as long as it was like within a certain number of kilometer radius from your house. So people were biking and running and walking a little bit. But it was a very strange period. And what was really interesting, I always say this, is that Italians followed the rules. Like the prime minister said, this is lockdown, we're doing this, numbers are out of control, people need to just stay in their house and only go out for these 3 reasons, pharmacy, supermarket, whatever, and of course with mask, and everybody did it. Which is really interesting because Italians are breaking laws and rules all the time, and they're sort of notorious for not following the rules, but everyone followed the rules. And it was really kind of amazing. But yeah, tourism and a few other industries completely dried up and are still really struggling. I have lots of colleagues and friends and people I know who are no longer able to work in the industry, or had businesses that closed. So my trips have been put on hold, but things will pick up, and I still have trips booked for next year. And I feel now in this moment quite positive that everything's going to come back. But there was a period during the path, and thank God I had the path, because I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have that group and Scott. And there was a period where it was pretty dark and pretty grim. Yeah. It's been a
Yeah,
long year.
it's been crazy, but look at you. You're so like happy and peaceful and just, I don't know, such a positive outlook. Like even talking about the business, you're like, it's going to come back, and it totally is. So, I mean, that's just awesome. I love that. Do you think you would have that access to kind of that positivity or that outlook or that hope if you were still drinking?
Oh gosh, no, 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 absolutely not. And I mean, of course, alcohol is a depressant, and I never really understood if the negative thoughts come first and that alcohol just kind of, um, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Then alcohol just motivates further those alcohol, the negative thoughts, or if it's the other way around. I mean, I just feel like it's so easy to get down and go down a dark path when there's alcohol involved. And um, always feeling, out of shape, because when you're drinking a fair amount, you just can't go out and run or ride a bike. I mean, maybe you can go for a walk, but, just always feeling like I was overweight and not, fit enough, and always beating myself up for that. So it's like this negative thought loop that just keeps going on and on and on. Um, so would I be hopeful about my business? Probably not. I think I'd be a bit in a big self-pity party about the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, Carol, that you said, I don't know if it would have been, it was kind of like, does alcohol affect our emotions? And I've been doing a lot of research recently on emotions in general. And I've been reading this amazing book. Actually, I'll show it to you. It's How Emotions Are Made by Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. And there's a lot of stuff, and from her work and then some other sources, I've kind of, been looking at emotions in this way, that there's really 3 layers. And so if you think of the first layer is like your affect. And so affect is a word for what you actually feel inside your body, right? So if you feel, you can have feelings that you have since you were a baby. You can feel calm, or you can feel riled up, you can feel excited, you can feel energetic, you can feel hungry, you can feel tired. This is what you actually feel inside your body. And then the second layer, it's what Dr. Barrett says, is that this is where emotions actually come from. It is meaning. So what meaning we give to the feeling based on sort of past predictions of things that have happened in our lives or circumstances that have happened. And then I would actually say that there's a third layer, and I think that layer is when we judge ourselves for our emotions. And so we almost add suffering to the first two. So you can ratchet up the intensity in terms of, like, you could just wake up and you could feel a little bit like, rumbling in your stomach and heart beating. And then you could give it a meaning like, oh my gosh, I'm having a panic attack. And then of course that perpetuates the whole thing. It feeds back into your feeling, into your physical body. And then you can judge yourself for, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't be having a panic attack. I'm, why? Everything's perfect in my life. And then of course that is just adds to the emotional thing. And the reason I'm bringing all this up is because removing alcohol changes your affect. It actually changes the chemistry inside of your body. So when you are drinking, your body responds to alcohol by releasing adrenaline and cortisol, which are stimulants in order to counteract the depressant nature of alcohol. So when you stop drinking, you just naturally feel more peaceful. And of course, then it's up to us to decide, what meanings we are going to give to the times where things are anxious, or we do feel intense, or there's situations happening in our lives where, especially during lockdown and everything else, where you do feel totally out of control. But I do think that there's a huge connection with the actual physicality of your feelings and drinking.
Absolutely. That's so interesting, Annie. I'm particularly interested in the meaning part, because I'm wondering if the meaning is just a collection of thoughts or a thought, and can it change too, depending on the day, right? Like you could give meaning to one emotion one day and maybe a different meaning another day. And what is meaning? It's so tied to our cultural background, our experience, our life experience. But that's fascinating. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think meaning is all of those things. So, in my, a good example of this would be, she talks about studies in this book where the chemical reaction in your body for the feeling excited is the same as for the feeling anxious. So actually the sweaty palms, the rumbling, stomach, they're the same. So this situation, it's the same affect, but if you are walking onto a stage and you decide, oh my gosh, I'm terrified, then of course that's going to go in one direction and your body is going to respond. But if you decide, oh my gosh, this is so exciting, I get to do this, that's going to go in one direction and your body's going to respond, right? You could be feeling, rumbling in your stomach. The example she gives in the book is feeling rumbling in your stomach. And if the situation that you're in is you're in a bakery, you could make that mean you're hungry. But if the situation that you're in is you're in a hospital waiting room, obviously the context is going to be like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Like, what's going on? What's wrong? And of course, it's not just as simple as that, because of course it is like there is a reality that you're in the hospital versus the bakery. But our ability, she makes the argument that our ability to have control over the meaning, although it is something that you put time and effort into, and obviously all about the ACT technique from the path, it is one of the primary ways we manipulate that lever of meaning. So I would say in your emotional health or your emotional set point, there's really 3 layers. So you've got your affect, and the way to manipulate that layer would be stopping drinking. It's a brilliant one, like you were getting outside into the fresh air. That
Right.
totally changes it. Friendships, actually, she states research that says, your affect is regulated when you have other people around. So your sons or your family, whatever the case is. Nutrition, sleep, meditation, all of these things can actually change our physicality. And then when our physicality is changed, you're much less likely, like if it's the old acronym, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. This is why that makes sense, because you could be, angry and then just make that mean, something that you have to escape, and you've created all these meanings. All of a sudden you're drinking. You could be hungry and all of a sudden you're drinking. So if you know that you're not hungry, if you know that you're not lonely, if you know that you're not tired, and work on those things, that's managing your affect, which is that first lever. So you have control there. And then the most control, and I think it takes longer and it takes more repetition, because we do have pathways in our brains that are based on very repetitive thinking that we've thought millions of times before. And most of our thoughts are recycled from the day before. So we do have these pathways, but they are absolutely malleable and changeable according to neuroplasticity. And so the lever of meaning is the place that, although it takes more work, it's more work to change your meaning for alcohol than it is to just start going on a walk every single day. It doesn't feel like more work, but it is, because it is like, it takes, you experienced it. You went through many, many different iterations of knowledge before the shoe finally dropped, right? And then, so this lever, I would say takes more work and investment, but is the biggest bang for your buck. I would credit me changing my meaning lever and, my repetitive thinking and what I made things mean about myself, about my life. I was responsible for me getting off antidepressants and, really moving into like a much freer, happier space. But I would say that wasn't possible until I changed my affect, which was the drinking. So none of that was possible until I stopped drinking. And then I really started to work on the meaning. And just little things, like I would change my meaning. I might have told you this story when you were in the past, but I would change the meaning of walking into my house and it being cluttered or not picked up from nobody cares about me. Like they don't understand how hard I'm working. Nobody wants to put things in the right place, which by the way is such a silly meaning, because there's no, 3, 6, and 9-year-old thinking those thoughts, right? And certainly my husband, who's trying to manage all those kids, is not, oh, I'm just going to leave the mess because I just don't care about my wife. Like that's not happening. But that was my meaning, and I wasn't even conscious of it. So I'd walk into the house and I'd feel immediately triggered and upset, right? And then I was able to change it through work, of course, to, wow, if the house is a mess, like means everybody's alive and it's well lived. Like this is a life well lived. And here we are, like, this is great. And especially during COVID, when everybody's home all the time and like, geez, keeping a lid on the clutter is like impossible. It's just awesome, right? And then I think the next layer, you have a lot of ability to change too, and that's in judgment. And that can be instantaneous. Just stop. Just stop judging yourself. All feelings are okay. All thoughts are okay. Everything is okay. Just stop judging yourself for having a human experience, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's just so interesting how powerful our thoughts are. And I also think that, I've had like ebbs and flows with journaling, but I'm back in my journaling phase. And I've been asking myself questions in the morning, like instead of just like writing down 3 things I'm grateful for and then just free flow writing. I've been asking myself questions like, so what are 3 limiting beliefs that I have about myself? um Besides 3 things that I'm grateful for, and then 3 things that I could do differently today than I did yesterday, or just like switching it up and just writing those things down, and then I'll think about it again like during the day. It's just so interesting, I think, all these things, how when we have a clean body and a clean alcohol-free brain, it's amazing how it's like I feel like it's my superpower. I've heard people say this before, but now I really feel like it's a superpower.
Yeah, like I feel the same way, like, a superpower and just like such a badass, like just feels so good, in such good ways. So that's amazing. I love that. So aside from, all of the stuff we talked about with the craziness of life, how else has it been? Have you had any other difficulties or bumps in the road with being alcohol free for a year now?
I still haven't lost the weight that I want to lose, and I think for a long time, especially with me getting alcohol free sort of during the pandemic, essentially, because it's been since December of last year, but the whole thing sort of fell to the ground here in Italy early March, the first week of March. So it's kind of been like, and I think I shifted a little bit of my I don't know, bad habit to food a little bit in the beginning, because you know how you do that, like, oh well, I can eat chocolate because I'm not drinking wine, or I can and even though I was walking and doing all this exercise, I still didn't lose any weight. I didn't like put on a ton of weight, but I'm still sort of struggling with that. And you hear people talk about this all the time, in forums and different whatever Facebook groups about, oh, I thought I was going to stop drinking and lose all this weight, and it just doesn't really happen that way,
Yeah.
especially later in life. But it's so that's been a little bit of a struggle. I've been, but I've done all these amazing things this year. People are always like, oh, it's just so awful what's happened to you and your business, and you don't have any work, and that's just horrible. I've had so many people say that to me, and I'm like, yeah, it's not so great, but all these amazing things have happened. I pitched my company to some investors. I started a whole series of alcohol-free tours in a program called Nutre. I've, you know, I I'm in the process of buying a little house next to a piece of property that I already own in the Cinque Terre.
Oh,
Um, but it's something that, I'm gonna slowly pay off because I don't have the money to buy it now, but it's something that's sort of coming together anyways. And just all these kind of amazing things are happening, even though, yeah, my business is not moving forward at the moment, and we're still in a pandemic, and who knows when the vaccines are going to happen and people are going to travel again, and there's all these question marks, but there's all these amazing things that happened this year also. So I think those things happened because all of a sudden there was this huge space, and within that space there I was with the wherewithal to work on these other things and see how I could get some things moving creatively and in a forward moving direction, even though my business was at a standstill. But I don't think I could have done that drinking.
yeah, yeah. It does. You need the space, because if you fill it with alcohol or you numb away the motivation or the desire or the feelings or the pain of not being where you want to be, like you get rid of all of your momentum. You get rid of all your reasons for changing. I mean, it just it just goes away. So I think that's so true. Absolutely.
Yeah. But
Awesome.
I will mention this one other thing that I think is really interesting. So before last December, let's see, 6 months before I went alcohol free, my brother died. Basically, he drank himself to death at 63 years. My oldest brother, really, really sad. And then 6 months before his death, there was a colleague of mine, about my age. We had worked together for many years, who also had huge issues with alcohol and ended up taking his own life. And alcohol was all involved in that. And so I had these two major events, major, special people in my life leave this life because of alcohol, and that still wasn't enough. I think it's really interesting sometimes how we have to go down our own path, so to speak. Like it takes whatever time it takes to get to where you finally just say, okay, enough is enough. Like I should have said that. I said that at my brother's funeral, actually. I mean, I gave the eulogy and I was like, okay, enough is enough. But then I drank again. And it's just so interesting. The process is so different for everybody.
Yeah. It's true. Everybody has their own way and their own, and sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it doesn't, and it's all okay. When we judge ourselves and compare ourselves to other people, I think we just do ourselves such a disservice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so great. Well, let me ask you the question that I ask at the end, which is if you were going to go back in time to Carol, who was drinking and, feeling like wanting to make a change, trying different things like AA and stuff, what would you tell her about how life is like now?
Wow. I would say that the vibrance that I feel is like 20 times what it was when I was drinking. There's an intensity and a clarity and just joy. Like, okay, and I don't feel joy 100% of the time, but the moments that I feel joy, the joy is so intense that I feel like a little kid. Like sometimes I feel like a little girl again, like woohoo! It's an amazing feeling. And who wouldn't want to feel that? Like who would, and it's not, a lot of people go alcohol free and they have horrible depression still. And this is just my experience. This is just my own personal experience, is that I feel the intensity of all emotions, and the one that sticks out the most, I think, is joy, because that's the one that I feel more often and I feel with such intensity. Yeah.
It's so true. I feel the same way. And sometimes you're just like surprised by it. It's like, wow, when did this show up? Why does this feel so good? Do I really get to live this life? Why doesn't everybody see that life is such a gift? Why didn't I for like 40 years? Like, what is, it's like, it is. And someone reminded me, they're like, it's just a little shift. Like, it's all the same stuff. It's not like any circumstances changed. In fact, some things have gotten way worse, but it's just a little shift emotionally, just inside, an internal shift, which is so cool. It's awesome. Well, this has been great. I really enjoyed it, and appreciate you coming on and telling your story.
Absolutely, Annie.
All right. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
If you asked me about the one thing that makes this naked mind so different from anything else, I would have to say emotion. It's the emotion people feel when they're really ready to make a change, when they've had that mindset shift, when they've gone through all the materials and the methodology, and they get this feeling that they're never going to get to drink again. They let that go and they think, oh my gosh, I never have to drink again. That change in emotion, and honestly, according to all sorts of new research, it is emotion, especially positive emotion, more than anything else else that predicates how long a change in our behavior will stick and how long it will last. It's emotion. And so when you feel excited about a change in your life, when you're thrilled you're making this new, different change instead of feeling deprived or like you've been missing out, everything changes. And that's really what makes This Naked Mind stick for the long term. That's what makes it so different, is we focus on how you feel and truly change your emotion around drinking. And if that sounds interesting to you, I want you to check out our self-guided path at nakedmindpath.com. Enrollment in this program is closing on June 11th, so you don't want to miss it. It's closing now, and this is the path to changing your emotion and changing your feelings so that you can really, truly find freedom in your relationship with alcohol. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast as it helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.